if I told you that a critical part of an entire country's economy could just vanish? Not over a few years, but in a matter of days. Well, that's exactly what's happening in Thailand right now. It's a sudden, massive shock that sent the country into a tailspin. And at the very heart of it all is one staggering number.
600,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. It's so big, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. But this isn't just a statistic on a screen.
Each one of those 600,000 represents a person, a worker, who in a very short span of time packed up everything and headed for the border. You see, this wasn't some planned, orderly migration. This was a sudden, panicked exodus that has torn a gaping hole in Thailand's workforce.
So you have to be asking, right? How on earth could something like this happen so fast, and what happens next? In this explainer, we're going to get to the bottom of the cause, the absolutely devastating impact, and the desperate scramble to find a solution.
All right, first things first, let's really get a handle on the sheer scale of this thing, because understanding the numbers here is absolutely key to grasping how serious the situation really is. So, that 600,000 number, it's a mix. About 300,000 were legally registered workers, and at least 300,000 more were undocumented. But here's the kicker, the number that really shows how fragile this whole situation is. Sources suggest there could be as many as 2 million more undocumented workers still in the country. That tells you just how much worse this crisis could get.
Now, a departure this large doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's like throwing a massive boulder into a pond. It creates an immediate shockwave across the entire economy, and that ripple effect is hitting some of the most foundational industries.
We're talking about the bedrock of the economy here. Industries like agriculture, fishing, construction, the sectors that literally build the country and put food on the table. And right now, many of them have been brought to a sudden grinding halt, all because their workforce has essentially disappeared.
And the human cost, it's just stark. To really get it, you just have to listen to stories like this one. This quote is from a 68-year-old fishing boat owner. He's been working the sea for 50 years, but today, his boat is tied to the dock. His entire Cambodian crew went home, leaving him with one guy and a business that's on the brink of collapse. And his story is being repeated all along the coast.
And the pain isn't some future problem. It is immediate. The agricultural sector, right in the middle of harvest season, needs up to 70,000 workers, like yesterday. Construction sites in Bangkok have gone quiet. The service industry is feeling a major impact. This is an economic emergency that is happening right now, today.
So what in the world could trigger something like this? Why would 600,000 people just abandon their jobs pretty much overnight? Well, the answer isn't one single thing. It's more like a perfect storm of high-stakes politics and pure viral fear.
So, at the very top, you have these growing political tensions simmering between the Thai and Cambodian governments. But what really poured gasoline on the fire was a wave of disinformation that spread like wildfire among the workers themselves. Terrifying rumors started flying around. One said that if they stayed in Thailand, their land back home in Cambodia would be seized. Another one, even scarier, suggested their actual nationality could be revoked. I mean, faced with the threat of losing everything, what do? You flee.
Okay, so with the country bleeding workers and key industries grinding to a halt, the Thai government is, as you can imagine, scrambling to stop the bleeding. But finding a solution? Well, that's proving to be incredibly complicated.
The Ministry of Labor has set up what they are literally calling a war room to coordinate a response. But here's the thing about that room. There's no easy consensus. We're seeing different groups pushing for very different ideas, from pragmatic, short-term fixes all the way to some really hardline political moves.
One of the most structured proposals is coming from an NGO called the Migrant Population Network. They've laid out a pretty clear three-stage plan. First, short-term. Bring in temporary workers from Laos and Myanmar to plug the most urgent gaps. Second, mid-term. Open up a new round of registration to try and legitimize some of those undocumented workers who are still in the country. And third, long-term. They argue Thailand needs a complete overhaul of its entire strategy for managing migrant labor, so this can never, ever happen again.
And this gets to a really crucial choice they have to make. Who do you bring in to replace the workers who left? One option is to look to Laos and Myanmar. The workers there have a similar profile, similar costs, and they're a good fit for the farm and construction jobs. The other idea is to look farther away, to places like Sri Lanka or Vietnam. The catch is, those workers are often more skilled and more expensive, maybe a better fit for the service industry, but not for the backbreaking manual labor jobs that are sitting empty right now.
And then you have this perspective, a completely different take. This is a direct quote from the head of Thailand's Labor Committee. And his suggestion isn't to fix the problem, but to use it as leverage. He's proposing that Thailand should actively send the remaining 500,000 legal Cambodian workers home. The thinking is that the economic pressure would force Cambodia's hand without ever firing a shot. It's an incredibly hardline stance that turns labor policy into a geopolitical weapon.
So where does all of this leave Thailand? Well, the country is at a critical crossroads, really. It's caught between an immediate economic disaster, a long-term strategic need, and some seriously explosive regional politics.
And that hardline proposal brings us to this really key concept, geopolitical leverage. What does that mean? Well, it's basically when a country uses a non-military tool. In this case, its labor market, the jobs of 500,000 people, to try and influence the political decisions of another nation. It is a high-stakes game with massive consequences for everyone caught in the middle.
So when you boil it all down, this is the core dilemma that Thailand's leaders are wrestling with. They have an immediate, desperate need to fill labor gaps to stop their economy from collapsing. At the same time, there's the long-term challenge of creating a stable, predictable labor policy. And all of this is happening while navigating intense political pressure from neighbors and, of course, dealing with the human factor, the lives and fears of millions of people hanging in the balance.
The path that Thailand chooses next is going to have ripples for years to come. Will it find a pragmatic solution that stabilizes its economy and protects its workforce, or will this crisis just become another casualty of the great geopolitical games being played out across the region? That's the big question, and the answer remains to be seen.